Hello everyone, it's me, the random YouTuber, here to hopefully help you with biology. This is Chapter 1, an introduction to life on Earth, and this is a basic chart explaining all the different steps all the way from atoms to community, aka ecosystem. So atoms make up molecules, which are basically elements. Those make up cells, to tissues, organs, which make up organ systems, of course, like the digestive system, partially shown here. Multiple organ systems make up different living beings, like this antelope here. A bunch of one species is a population, and different species make up the community. This is a plant cell. Basically, this is artificially colored, so it's not really this bright, but this is a plant cell. And all the different dots in there, those circles, are the different organelles, which are basically a cell's organs. Here's definitions of everything, if you needed to read those. It just basically goes over what's in this chart that was on the left. And this, natural causality. That basically explains that people used to think that things happen due to supernatural forces usually. Like it explains here that larvae they thought used to just come out of meat that was rotting, which we know isn't true. Larvae are baby flies. But that was in, of course, the medieval times when they didn't know. And the scientific method, most people go over this in middle school or high school chemistry or science class. Basically, it's just a method explaining how something can be found out scientifically. Here's a pretty basic example of that. There's an observation that's made, which forms a question, then a theory, which is also known as a hypothesis. That forms a prediction, which is then tested on, and a conclusion is made. And if further testing is done, or a theory needs to be revised, that is done, and more observations and experiments are done. Pretty simple. It's done all the time. Here's a couple examples. Here's that meat thing with the larvae. Basically, the conclusion is that the experiment shows that the hypothesis is that flies are the source of maggots and not the meat. So here's all of this here, the observation, question, hypothesis, and there was a prediction here. So they did the experiment. One jar is left uncovered with meat, and flies can go in and produce maggots. But on the right, there's a jar that is kind of sealed. It's supposed to be a mesh that's over the top where the flies can smell the meat, but they can't get in, and therefore no maggots. So here's the experiment that was done, and the conclusion, which I basically said earlier. And here's another one. These two different types of the same bird. Basically, it's the same breed, but one there on the right has a short tail and the other has a long tail. This is a widow bird, and the males have really long tails. So the question is, why do males but not females have really long tails? So their theory was that the males have the long tail because the females like it. So their prediction is that if the females prefer the long tails, then males with artificially lengthened tails, even if it's truly short, they'll attract more females. So they did this test, they got their results, and their conclusion was that the widow birds do prefer to mate with long-tailed males. So 1.2 is basically just goes over evolution and DNA. So DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, which DNA is formed from chromosomes, and those basically are traits that we have. The color of skin or hair or how tall we are is all determined by DNA. Mutations can occur also, usually from our DNA if it's not copied right in our cells or something goes wrong. That's basically what it looks like. It's like a twisted pasta form. And that DNA forms all the diversity on the planet, which causes, of course, natural selection, which is the way genes are preserved to help an organism survive and reproduce. It says there it produces different traits, which some are better than others in different situations. And biodiversity, here's just like what the word is. It's the diversity in nature. Section 1.3, what are the characteristics of living things? So basically, living things are composed of cells, of course. Living things react to stimuli in their environment, and they can actively maintain a complex structure and their internal environment, which is called homeostasis. Also, living things acquire and use materials and energy from their environment, like tools and different foods and stuff. This is a water flea, only 1 millimeter long. Yet it has legs and a mouth and a digestive tract and even reproductive organs. It's really tiny, but that's a really big picture of it. So this basically goes over that statement that living things acquire and use energy and materials, which nutrients is one, where we get from food, which is our digestive system is good for that, of course. Energy, plants, of course, use their leaves and photosynthesis for that. And section 1.4, how do scientists categorize the diversity of life? Excuse me. There's different domains: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. That's just different cells classified. Bacteria and archaea are usually just consisted of simple single cells, and eukarya group have bodies composed of more complex cells, which would be multicellular beings. And then there's this domain, the eukarya domain, has subdivisions: fungi, plants, animals, as well as diverse or mostly single-celled organisms known as protists. So, binomial system. Let's see here. Categories within the various kingdoms are phylum, class, order, genus, and species. Biologists use this binomial system for naming various species. Here's a chart to help explain the domains and kingdoms of life. It's pretty easy once you understand and are able to look at everything. It's different cells there on the left, and the more complex things are on the right. Here's a chart for that. So there's a stick there. And here we are at the end of the chapter. Here's a bee pollinating a flower in a field. And here's a chapter review. Some questions if you want to study